And good morning, everybody. Welcome to FSU Coach. I should say good afternoon. It's 12 p.m. Eastern. Welcome to FSU Coach Live. My name is Tim Backhurst, joined by Megan Kahn. She's the CEO of WeCOACH. Megan, thanks so much for joining me. If you wouldn't mind, just give us a little bit of your history and how you got to where you are today.
Absolutely. I don't know. I'll try to be brief. It could be a long story. I have quite a few things in my history here that got me to where I am today. But thanks so much for having me on the show, Tim. I know you and I connected a couple of months ago, actually, probably right at the start of COVID. So it's certainly been interesting to watch the landscape unfold here these past several weeks. And now what we're watching to be, at least for the next 30 days as we head into June here. I grew up in sports, the ultimate tomboy, probably. I had a twin sister, which definitely shaped, I think, my athletic career growing up. Constantly had a playmate. There probably wasn't a ball that we didn't know how to throw or catch because I had somebody to play with totally throughout my childhood. And we ended up going on and playing college basketball together. I think during my college career, I wouldn't say that I 100% knew coaching was my lifelong calling, but it was something I was definitely interested in, definitely was my identity. And so thought that that was definitely a way for me to go on and get my graduate degree, and went on and coached for 4 years while I pursued a bachelor's degree in sport administration. I think during that time, definitely realized I was not cut out to make my livelihood on 18 to 22-year-olds, sometimes knuckleheads, let's be honest, they can be knuckleheads. But I wanted to have a bigger impact. It was more about where I saw myself on a larger scale, definitely in the game of basketball, but I think women's sports as a whole, I sort of saw myself as a mentor and a role model, and wanted to pull other young girls who maybe weren't as fortunate, or other young women, into not only being able to experience athletics and be afforded the opportunities that I had growing up, but then pull them into being leaders in the space. And there weren't enough visible women in the space. I quickly realized I had a male coach all the way until I went to my college career. And so recognizing that, and then the impact of how I viewed my college coach as so influential in my life, it was the decision I made to go to that institution was because of her. And so what could I do, I think, and what impact could I make? What difference could I make? What could I give back? I left coaching, decided administration was definitely the route for me, and got on at the ACC, where I was there for 4 years in the conference office in Greensboro, North Carolina, with ACC women's basketball. From there, I went to the Atlantic 10 conference. Definitely get asked a lot, like, why did I choose conference office instead of a campus? And really it was like, because you're impacting not just one single campus, but you're having an impact on 10, 14, 15, however many are in that league at that level when you're in a conference office. And so when I was at the ACC from 2006 to 2008, for those of us that are a little bit older, if you backtrack in your minds, it's, the ACC had 3 of the top 5 teams in the country in women's basketball. We sold out the ACC women's basketball tournament. Those years that I was there, was truly kind of the front runner for what was happening in the game of women's basketball at the collegiate level in that time. A next opportunity was afforded me, and I think this was a huge lesson for anyone watching also, is like, I never thought I would leave the ACC. I thought I was definitely in a position that I saw myself in. I loved it. We were the top in the country. We still had a lot of growth. We were hosting 2 Sweet 16s at that point in time. That opportunity was handed to me, and I truly thought I didn't want to leave. I was sick to my stomach over having to make that decision to leave, but it was one of those opportunities where you can't pass up. And so, not being afraid to maybe get outside your comfort zone. I ended up going to the Atlantic 10 conference office, and went up to Philadelphia for a short period of time, and was part of the relocation of that conference office. Then when it moved down to Virginia, so I was there for 4 years. The first 3 actually spent on the men's side of basketball. So I think at the time I was one of the lone females working in men's D1, not a Power 5, but definitely one of those highly sought after conferences. I think I was definitely the youngest female in that space. So the first 3 years I was actually on the men's basketball side. My last year there, I switched back to the women's side of the game. When you're at the conference office, not only do you do the scheduling, the TV picks, and everything else, but you also run the postseason tournament. And so having an opportunity as very young and to walk into those conference meetings and to sit in a room with Fran Dunphy or Phil Martelli. These are legends in the men's game, and having to sort of stand my own and hold my ground as a a youngster in the profession was quite a learning experience. I think it's sort of fake it till you make it at that point in time. And then flipped back to the women's side, was a little more comfortable, probably a little more inside my comfort zone for my last year. And then honestly, it was a leap of faith. From there, had a fantastic experience. Those are awesome people in the A10, still have great relationships and dear friends in that league. But wanted to start my own consulting business and felt like I had enough relationships and enough experience where I could pick and choose some of the projects that I wanted to do, really focused on the championship experience. And so 2012, I ended up starting my own consulting business and did a number of championship events, another small project work. The highlight, I think, of those years is definitely getting to run 2 women's Final Fours, 2015 and 2019, both in Tampa, which is where I was based out of at that point in time. And so I think when those opportunities were presented to me, it was one of those times in your career where you realize that not only preparation can get you ready for something, but you would have to be lucky enough to live in a locale where a Final Four is coming to your city. And so that happened to me twice in 2015 and 2019. And truly probably 2 of the greatest professional experiences I've been able to be a part of. I think when you're looking at the pinnacle of the sport in our most visible women's sport outside of, obviously soccer now on the national scale, but in the collegiate space, women's basketball, and getting to run everything in the arena for those 2 marquee events at the pinnacle of what every student athlete and coach is going for every single season is definitely probably 2 of the highlights of my professional career. At that same point in time, when I started my consulting business, I started to actually work for our organization. At the time, we were Alliance of Women Coaches before we rebranded in 2018 to WeCOACH. And so that even though I've been, I guess we're coming up on 4 years now as the executive director, now CEO of WeCOACH, I have a long history with the organization in some way, shape, or form, almost since its inception, when it was co-founded by Celia Slater, who's an FSU alum, and Judy Sweet back in 2011. And so really was able to be around in some capacity in those early years, some of the development with the board of directors and like literally writing bylaws and policies and procedures and all the things that go along with starting a nonprofit organization. And so, I would say kind of bobbed in and out of some of those conversations. I was paid hourly in those days as an independent contractor. And so, just truly have immersed myself in the organization and had the opportunity to become executive director back in August of 2016. And the rest is history, as we should say, right?
Yeah. And in fact, Celia was a guest on our show a few weeks ago. So any of you watching want to go back, look for hers. It's on our YouTube channel. Can you tell us a little bit then about what WeCOACH is and does for those who may not be familiar with it?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned in my introductory comments, we started as the Alliance of Women Coaches, founded in 2011 by Celia and Judy. What preceded that was the NCAA Women Coach Academy, which is still our premier programming event for female collegiate coaches, D1, D2, and D3 to this day. The Academy began in 2003, so that predated the organization by about 8 years. And what was the impetus for them founding the organization was this idea of some sort of alumni network. All these female coaches who had come through the Academy wanted a reunion, talked about a reunion, coming back to some event where they could connect again with not only the folks that were in their classes, but this entire new network of what we call as Academy grads. And have an opportunity to really surround themselves with like-minded women in the space. There's few and far between. And so to have this core group, this community engagement was really the impetus for the founding of the organization by Celia and Judy back in 2011. Quickly, it has accelerated, I think, from Celia and Judy, and then we had another executive director for a couple of years who took the reins and got the ship stabilized, so to speak, and primed for growth. And then in my 4 years, I've been able to take the baton and run with it, and we've been able to grow. And I like to think of myself as a builder. That's what I'm creative. I'm going to build. I'm going to have my foot on the gas 90 miles an hour almost all the time. Probably much to the dismissal maybe of my team at some points in time, but it's the only way I know is to swing for the fences. And I think really that's what WeCOACH has been able to do. We have 3 pillars. I could dumb it down. There's 3 pillars of our work, and it's to recruit coaches, it's to retain coaches, and it's to advance female coaches. Not that we're anti-male, because we're certainly not. We recognize very much that we need male allies in the space, but our work is focused on women coaches and the unique challenges that they face in the profession, where we are currently and how we progress to where we want to go in the future. And so everything that we do aligns within one of those pillars. The core of what we do currently is around the is around the retain and the advance piece. The recruit piece is an area that we're slowly growing as we look at that future pipeline of female coaches. We just saw a legend retire from women's basketball in Muffet McGraw. So who are the young women who are coming behind her that can fill these premier spots, whether they're replacing a female legend or potentially a male legend across the board. That's one of the ways we can get more women into the space is to replace an outgoing male with a female, right? As we look at the number of women, specifically at the D1 level, we're like 42%. That means 6 out of every 10 women's teams are still coached by a man. And so how do we move that needle? I certainly don't think WeCOACH is the sole one that's going to be able to make lasting change. It's going to take a whole host of people and organizations and commitment from the top down in terms of the leaders to try to move the needle and better the landscape, than where we currently are. Whether it's the youth level is worse than that, or worse than that, the high school level is worse than that. We're seeing a little bit of progress at the D1 level in women's sports. We do much of our tracking in women's sports, honestly, Tim, because there's just not enough women in men's sports yet. Less than 3% of male collegiate teams are coached by women, and so much of our tracking is still done on the women's sports side. Not to say that our programming is specifically for those who coach women. They could coach men as well, but we are targeting on the unique challenges that women face in the profession. And so I don't know how deep you want me to go here in terms of some of the programs we offer, some of the resources that we offer. I can pause there and see what you had in mind.
Yeah, and of course you have your website where a lot of this is also mentioned. You did talk about youth sports, you talked about high school sports, you talked about college sports. You didn't mention professional sports, and you also didn't mention international sports. And so what's the reach of WeCOACH? Are you expanding into those areas as well, or do you already?
Yeah, the core of what we do, over 50% of our membership, funny enough, is Division I, and I think that's a testament to the premier opportunity of our academy, right? Our longstanding partnership with the NCAA that has been in place, and the premier development opportunity with the academy. 2 years ago, we launched 2.0, which is the second phase of the second development opportunity for the academy. I think that's why we have been so centralized around the D1, the D2, the D3 space. We are dipping our toe a little bit into the high school space this year for the first time. Pre-COVID, we had on the calendar an event specifically for female high school coaches in partnership with the High School Federation. Hopefully we'll see that return in 2021 after COVID. A little bit in the professional ranks, a little bit in the international space, I think, as well. We just had Breakthrough Summit, which was the first ever digital leadership summit for women in sports, hosted in partnership with Huddle. That was last December. We had folks from all over the world joining in on that day. We actually have had some internationally come and attend our academies in the summertime. So we definitely have a little bit of international flavor. We have some female coaches in the professional ranks that are supporters of what we do. Cheryl Reeve is probably, I would say, WNBA. Cheryl Reeve, Jill Ellis with soccer. So we do have a little bit of a presence in the professional space as well.
Well, if you're just joining us, we're talking with Megan Kahn. She's the CEO of WeCOACH. If you do have a question for her, just put it in your chat box and we'll get it to her. One of the things you mentioned were, and forgive me if I quote incorrectly here, but the unique challenges of women coaches is something you mentioned. And so I wanted to ask you, what that means. What do you consider to be the unique challenges that women coaches face in today's society?
Well, in truly, it's a bit of a microcosm of what's happening in society itself, right? And so if we look at what's happening across the board in sports, though, we're one of the few segments that still identify leadership by gender, right? We don't say I'm going to my female lawyer. We don't say I'm going to my female dentist. We don't say I'm going to my female doctor. But yet in sports, we still identify the coach of the team by their gender, or by it's the women's Final Four. It's the Final Four for the men's, or it's the women's Final Four for the women. And so there's still a lot of gender identification around just the whole of our industry, whether it's at the youth level all the way up to the professional ranks. And so I think as we look at what's happening in that landscape and recognizing if we took all the coaching jobs out there, regardless of the gender of the athletes competing, right? Women probably have access to about half that pool, right? Men can get all the jobs. They can coach women's teams, they can coach men's teams, but women, and I'm just talking pretty stereotypical here, we know women have broken the glass ceiling and have broken into the men's side. But if we look at the scale of what that's happening, women have access to about half of the total coaching jobs. And so one, we have a lack of opportunities to even get into the space, to be retained in the space, or to advance in the space. That's unique to women because men have access to 100% of the jobs across the board. And so first and foremost, lack of opportunity is specific to females and to women in the space. And that goes down to how often do we look at what's happening at the youth level and the grassroots level, and dad's the t-ball coach and mom's the snack runner. Right. And so it sends the whole gamut, right? If you take it up at the WNBA level, and there's 10 WNBA teams, 6 of them are still coached by men on the women's side, right? So why shouldn't women have 100% of the jobs? Men have 100% of the NBA head coaching jobs, right? And so as we start to look at some of the inequities just from the what's happening in the landscape of just quick visibility of women in the space, I think that's probably one of the core central ones. And as we trickle down to the intricate challenges, we talk about gender bias, right? Men are often the ones in hiring positions, and men hire like I hate to say it, white males tend to hire white males. We look at women of color, men of color for that matter, have fewer opportunities than even women in terms of that minority category. We look at work-life balance, and oftentimes women, mothers, are the full-time child rearer and raise the family and do much of the home life, and have a difficult time, maybe aren't supported well enough either in their home life or on the job to be able to maintain their family as they would like, and also pursue and stay in that coaching profession as they would like. We look at lack of pay. We look at lack of development. We look at sometimes, I can't tell you how many times, Tim, we're at an academy and one of our coaches might literally be the only female coach in their entire athletic department. So we look at some of these environments that are their day-to-day norm, and they have nobody around them who's supporting them. They have nobody that looks like them. They have nobody that cares about if they're successful, cares if they're supported, cares if they have the resources to do the things that they need to be successful. And what happens then when women leave the space, they're not recycled. Men are recycled, right? A coach gets fired and his buddy's going to hire him back in the space, and he's 2 years out as an assistant before he's back in a head job. That rarely happens to women. And so we need to look at then when we maybe take a risk on putting a female in the head coach position, how are we as administrators, how are we as organizations, how are we as industry influencers helping them be successful? We want them to succeed. And if they don't, then are we able to look at ourselves and know we gave them every opportunity to succeed? And then if they don't succeed, how do we keep them in the profession and not let them be a statistic that went by the wayside?
When I first came to the U.S., one of the things that was bandied about was Title IX. And I didn't know what that was. And of course, I start with Google and start doing my research and start to learn what it is and how it changed the landscape of college sports. And it really advanced the number of female athletes in college, but it didn't necessarily do that for the number of female coaches. Can you talk a little bit about how Title IX has transformed the coaching landscape for women?
Yeah, and probably that's one of the statistics that creates and drives awareness on the national landscape, because it is almost on the opposite, right? As we've seen women participating in sports and girls participating, that number has skyrocketed with the benefit of Title IX. But on the coaching side, we've seen the statistic go from about 90% of women's teams at that point in 1982, when Title IX was enacted, were coached by women. Now that statistic is like 42%, and so it's completely plummeted. We're in what we call like a stagnant period. There hasn't been a lot of change. The good news is it's not continuing to drop. The bad news is it's not going back up as fast as anyone would like it to go back up. And so there's a lot of work still to be done. But that statistic alone, most people have zero idea that that's where it is, because they think and hear Title IX, like women are thriving in sports, and they're seeing the visibility of women competing, maybe, but not so much from the coaching lens.
How do you, as an organization, how do you support beyond just the programming that you offer in the conferences? How do you support females who want to get into coaching or get into coaching early on? They're new in their career and need that kind of mentorship of somebody who's been there and done that. Do you have any kind of mentorship programs that allow coaches to tap into resources beyond their own network?
Absolutely. I think that's probably one of the things I've been most proud of that we've launched on my watch is our mentor program. We spent a lot of time researching what mentor programs were out there, what existed. One of the things that makes us unique as an organization as a whole is how you have the WBCA, you have the AVCA, you have the NSCA, all the individual sport associations, and we're here to complement what they're doing, right? We're not competing with them, but within each of those, we are the only organization that represents all the sports and across all of the levels, as opposed to like the WBCA just represents basketball, but it's also male coaches and female coaches of the game of women's basketball. And so that's really what makes us unique from those organizations. But within each of those organizations, they do have their own mentor programs, but within that, it might be a male coach, right? And so what we did is we looked at what was going on in the individual sport associations. We looked at what was going on in the NFL. We looked at a number of other entities that had mentor programs in place. We also knew when we developed our mentor program that there's a statistic that says women are leaving the profession between 7 and 10 years in their career. And that's for, there's burnout, there's lack of pay, there's maybe they want to start a family, all the reasons that we kind of referenced before is leading them to leave the profession somewhere between 7 and 10 years. And so we put our heads to the table. We said, how can we make that, how can we help retain that person so that one, they're not leaving. So we get them to that point in their career where they're maybe a 15 or a 20 year a true livelihood of this is their livelihood for life. And we made them the cornerstone of our program. So we created it's a mentoring trio is what we call it. And so you have your super experienced coach who's 15 or 20 years in the profession. You have your mid-level coach who hits that 7 to 10 year period. And then you have your rookie coach, anyone who's been in the profession less than 5 years. And so we match them up into trios, and they work on the academic year for 8 months with their trio through monthly prompts that we set them up. And so we've had a lot of success with that. I think I want to say we served it was less than 50 coaches in our first year, and we've doubled that then for 2 years. And so that just shows you the need out there for women looking for these opportunities. And also because our program is very unique in how we've set it up.
When you look at coaching women or coaching girls, some of the guests that have been on my show have coached both males and females or are female coaches. And they've talked about the differences in coaching girls and women against boys and men. Can you talk a little bit about how it is different? And for those who maybe men who are becoming coaches or want to improve in coaching, and maybe they are coaching women and girls, some of the differences and that they should be aware of.
Well, there are a lot of differences. I think first and foremost, again, let's just look at the landscape of what's happening in women's sports versus men's sports. Specifically, I won't go so much as to the club and the youth level here, but at the high school space and in the collegiate space, these allegations that we're seeing run rampant through programs against the coaches. If you look, they're happening in women's sports. They're happening and mainly against female coaches. We're running our own female coaches out of the industry from players, from parents getting involved, from folks who, and here's the thing, Tim, is like, now this is like widespread news. Like we've, meaning the industry, has seen that a few bad eggs can form then a mass of feedback and go above a coach's head to the sport administrator, to the head, to the AD or the president, and cause these things. And now with liability and everything that we know is happening and people being held accountable for, administrators they have to do their due diligence. They have to go investigate. They have to hit the pause button. And this is disruptive in women's sports. We're not seeing this happen we're not hearing this. We're not seeing this. It's not happening. So that alone fundamentally should tell you there's a huge difference in how women internalize or girls internalize being coached, being told, constructive criticism. Maybe it's resiliency. Maybe it's, mom and dad have handheld them. Mom and dad know everything from their one-sided point of view from their daughter that's happening within. When I played college basketball, my parents had no idea what happened in practice. I wasn't on a cell phone texting them every day or calling home every day and telling them that coach yelled at us or made us run 10 laps or whatever we had to do. But now, our pace of life and what's happening as a whole has allowed parents to touch the program in a way that we've never seen before. And so, when there's there's hardship, everyone knows who's competed in college, there's hardships along the way, right? It is not a cake ride the whole way. There's resiliency and grit and pushing you outside your comfort zone because maybe a coach sees a potential in you that you don't see in yourself. And so women internalize that very differently than men do, in being able to push those buttons. Women can be a lot more emotional. We know there's a lot of inter-team dynamics, I think, that probably affect the women's side much more than the men's side.
Yeah, one of the things that was interesting, I was talking with Jean-Marie Kutzer from South Africa yesterday, and she was talking about how when she works with women, and even as an athlete herself, she focused a lot more on technical aspects, whereas the men just tried to muscle the way through an exercise, and she wants to know the why, whereas the men just want to force their way through it. And I think that was something that was like, oh yeah, this is something that would be valuable to be able to explain the technical aspects and recognize that the men who are athletes as well need to change their perspectives. And so it's kind of that understanding that there are differences, and just assuming that you can walk in and a woman teach a male sport or a male teach a women's sport doesn't just work because of your experiences as an athlete or coach. Yep.
Very much, the game is the game, and obviously there's some nuance. Men, let's say basketball, can play above the rim, women cannot, and so there's some technical differences in the game. But the game of basketball is the game of basketball. But how you coach them and how you reach them and how you get them to respond is very different.
Mm-hmm. Now, the purpose of these interviews primarily is to help people who are either looking to progress as coaches or get into the coaching profession. Looking from the 30,000 foot view, in your experience, what advice would you have for those coaches who are trying to build up their skills or get into the profession?
Well, and I think it doesn't matter even what industry you're in. Let's just take it from the top. Is like, you have to take ownership of your career, right? If you're passionate about wanting to pursue whatever that might be, and in this case, let's say coaching, nobody else is going to care about your career for you as much as you can possibly care about your career. And so you have to take ownership, and that's investment in the hours, that's investment maybe in dollars, that's investment in time. Just like you would expect your student athletes to be 2 feet in on what you're wanting them to do. Like, we all have to be 2 feet in on our own career and understand what goals maybe are out there, where we see ourselves. It involves taking risks. Like, I think there is amount of risk in getting outside your comfort zone and maybe putting you in positions to grow. It's like, right, everyone wants maybe what's at the peak of that summit, but they don't want to have to go through the growing pains to actually grow to get there. And so to learning to be uncomfortable with the, learning to be comfortable with the uncomfortable to get there and to go through those growing pains, to put yourself in, maybe your head coach has only allowed you to do scheduling and recruiting, but you don't have any idea about building a budget or running summer camps. And so take on, even if you're just say, hey, could I sit in on your meetings? Can I learn? Can I watch you? Like, put yourself in positions to continue growing, because trust me, your head coach isn't going to care about, if you're an assistant, your head coach isn't going to care about if you learn budgeting, right? You have to take that ownership on yourself, and you have to go seek resources, whether that's through WeCOACH, whether that's through your sport association. You have to build a group of mentors and trusted confidence around you who, when you have issues, when you want to bounce ideas off of, when you maybe have potential career opportunities or jumps in front of you, and who can you go to? I think, obviously, as we know, this is very much a relationship business, right or wrong. It's not so much about who you know, but who knows you, right? And so how do we, most of the jobs are not because they plucked a resume out of hundreds of resumes that they received. They knew you knew somebody who could make a call on your behalf. You knew how to utilize your network. That's the one thing that men do so much better than women, is to utilize their network when jobs become available. And so it's not about calling a person who you haven't talked to in 5 years. It's about building and cultivating authentic relationships that stand the test of time. So when opportunities do become available, either somebody who could maybe help get you a job, or maybe even somebody know somebody who could put in a call or something like that on your behalf. And so it's utilizing all of these things that are truly at our fingertips, Tim, in trying to help to grow ourselves personally and professionally, right? And so it's not just about your professional growth. There's also personal growth. It's about women, probably, I would say. This is one, especially as we look at Power 5 jobs and we try to fulfill them with women, is there's a knock on women that they don't want to uproot and leave. Like, they're very comfortable in their communities. They're very comfortable maybe with their family, and their husband or spouse or wife has a job where they currently are. And so to uproot the family, men don't think twice about that, but women definitely think about that, and maybe aren't as willing to move or take a risk on a job. And so we do have to be willing to take risks. We do have to be willing to be a little bit uncomfortable maybe, and to grow and to put ourselves out there and to just volunteer, right? Like, honestly, that's how I got my ACC job. I volunteered. I knew I wanted to eventually work for ACC women's basketball at one point in time. And I had a friend who knew the associate commissioner there and said, hey, I know somebody, can she come volunteer for you? And so that's how you meet people. That's how you grow. That's how you learn. And it goes back to those relationships that we're able to build out of those experiences.
If somebody does have a question for you or about WeCOACH and wants to get in touch, what's the best way for them to do that?
Social media, obviously, is a great way. We're very active on social. People can contact me directly at my email address, which is megan@wecoachsports.org. Happy to answer, happy to help. I think if you visit our website, you'd find a whole host of other content and resources available we didn't have time to touch on today. But we have a number. I think that's the one thing, Tim, that we've been able to do as an organization, is to throw out a bunch of different resources, content. Obviously, there's the in-person program. So much of what's happening is in the digital space now, to meet people where they are at different points in their careers, and be able to provide them tools that they can do on their own time, even if it's maybe not one of our live video chats or something like that. There's tools that they can take advantage of in their own time.
Well, Megan, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about your organization and what you do, and advice for coaches.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Tim.
My pleasure. Just a reminder, coming up tomorrow, we have Florida Athletic Coaches Association Executive Director Shelton Cruz. He'll be talking about coaching in Florida and what coaching education and coach development looks like in this state. And then coming up on Thursday, Travis Wilson, the assistant coach for women's softball, will be talking about his experiences working with the FSU Seminoles. So hope you join us for both of those. But on behalf of myself, Tim Backhurst, and Megan Kahn, thank you so much for watching.